There was a question that I stopped earlier, and I'm not actually. I think he's gone. Actually. Oh yeah, no, you're still there. You're still there. That's right. And it happens to be a question that somebody else asked as well. And I apologise if I wasn't clear. The question was, couldn't anybody fake an internet logo, whatever the logo is? Well, of course they could. But the point I was trying to make, and probably didn't make clearly enough, is that individual countries will be required for having a database whereby people can determine whether or not the particular supplier is actually a registered supplier. I know that's not watertight, but it does give the customer some way of cross-referring the legitimacy, registration legitimacy of an internet pharmacy.
I was, in my previous life, a supplier and have been subjected to the numerous audits that come through the manufacturing facilities, and we're looking for opportunities to make that more efficient. But I was curious if, maybe start with Martin, if the Rx-360 and the whole auditing program has considered expanding the scope to include these elements of supply chain security risk, given that the effort to go audit quality systems is fairly large, and these issues of supply chain security seem to be so, so ingrained in our sense of quality system.
So we've already developed a guideline. Everyone heard the question, I think. So we already developed a guideline on how to do supply chain security audits. And so that's available on the website that you can go look at. But we also are in the process of offering that as a service to members, that we will do supply chain security audits. So that will be an offering that's being rolled out.
Another question for Martin here. I was wondering if you could spend a little bit of time speaking to the audience about Amgen's expectations of suppliers.
Yeah, so we're also high maintenance. All my supplier friends tell me that routinely. But then they proceed to tell me that we're the only ones that ever ask these questions. And I have to call BS on that too, because I heard today Roche was high maintenance, and I saw the questions they ask, and they're no different than what we ask. So, suppliers who say, what we want in Amgen are partners, right? We have definitely are changing our mindset. It's not something that happens overnight, but we're embracing the Deming model of end-to-end supply chain. And we want our suppliers to be partners with us. And so we're forming strategic partnerships with our suppliers. We call it our SRE initiative, Supplier Relations Excellence. And by building a partnership, right, we share the risk, we share the cost, we share the benefits. We work jointly on continuous improvement projects. We work jointly on CAPAs, mostly the preventive action things, the PA part, right? We insist on supply chain visibility and traceability, right? And we know that all of this is hard to do, but companies that have things like our colleague here put up on the screen, right? Electronic, original manufacturing tracking, the dossiers, those things that suppliers invest in are the suppliers that are going to be here at Amgen at the end of the day. And the ones who don't do that, the ones who don't want partnerships, and the ones who don't provide the visibility and the transparency. And when I say transparency, it's, okay, you're going to move something from one plant to the other. Rather than doing that, tell us why you're going to do that, right? And if we're doing something with your product and we're going to change, we're going to tell you what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we understand the why, the solutions are a whole lot easier. And so that transparency is so key and a big paradigm shift. But the companies who do that will have partnerships with Amgen. Their products will get into our licenses around the world. Once you're in a license, it's hard to get you out. The regulatory process are tough and onerous when you talk on a global perspective, right? Some countries, it could be a 30-day approval. In other countries, it could take you 4 years to get approved for a change. So we want to build partnerships. You get into the partnership, it's a long-term deal. And there's benefits to have a long-term deal, right? Predictability, consistency. But suppliers who continue to say to me, I'm the only one asking for it, at the end of the day won't be suppliers of Amgen in the future.
Kevin Cyber with Amgen. My question is for Gerald. But before I do that, I've been to a lot of supply chain security workshops and meetings, and I have to say, thank you very much for all the presenters. This is probably one of the clearest and most relevant collection of topics and information that I've seen, and thank you very much for the organizers and the folks who did it. But Gerald, I'm just wondering, just specifically to the safety feature part of the directive, what impact, if anything, is there on parallel importation related to that safety feature? Anything, any thought on that?
That's a very good question. I think probably the first thing I need to say is that despite the objection that some particularly innovative companies may have to parallel trade, it is part of Europe, a legitimate legal part of Europe, to have a free movement of goods, not just pharmaceutical goods, but goods in general. The requirement, as I would understand it, is that a parallel trader would have to reinstate a unique serial number on the pack, individual pack, which then would be recognised by the repository. So the intention and the practicalities are not easy, I understand that, but the intention is not to lose the traceability of a product if it is parallel traded.
Hi, I'm Lisa Correa, also from Amgen. My question, I started my career in finance accounting, CPA, so the concept of centralized auditing makes sense to me. So I was wondering, any additional take on why the pushback in industry, and is there like a centralized certification board that can, kind of elevate centralized auditors, to make it, more standard, just like certified public accountants are in the financial area?
I mean, it's so two parts. I don't think the certification is the resistance to doing it, right? It might help. It's something we can think about. But really, the resistance comes from all kinds of, right? Fear of change, right? It's different than we've ever done before. We all think we're special, right? And so, yeah, we're a proprietary company. But not everything we do is proprietary action. And then there's the fear of, well, if I let someone else do my audit, then what's my job going to be? Right? So that's from the manufacturer. And the supplier, the big fear is, well, if I have one bad audit with Amgen, I put at risk my Amgen business. If I have one bad XCPAT or one bad Rx-360, I put at risk my business with all of my customers. But we all know, and we all had suppliers who've had bad audits, right? We don't throw them out on their first bad audit. We work with them, we put CAPAs in place, we try to make the improvements, because one, it's a lot of work to change a supplier, and two, it takes a long time to get it approved. So it's easier to work with the supplier and fix those things. So to me, I'm not so sure that's a real reason for suppliers. And the suppliers who've gone through the Rx-360 audits all have commented positively now. And so I think the barriers will come down, but it's just so different and so new that it's just change management. From an XCPAT standpoint?
I think, probably. I think it's, yeah, I completely agree with Martin. I think what's really important, I think that the quality of the auditors is key. Therefore, you need to really be assured, let's say, that the qualification, the experience, the training is really equivalent. In the moment, let's say, you as an auditee perceive the auditors are really competent, objective, and so on, then the acceptance will increase. I think this is for sure. And to be fair, on the other side, let's say, in long run, I think there will be no other way, because, let's say, how to deal with all the audits. If every single company wants to audit you, and there's nothing bad about it, but just a question of not only of resources, of time, you have some bottlenecks. For example, if you have an audit every day in your quality control department, you drive you nuts, people. Huh? That's the point. Therefore, let's say this kind of Exipact, Rx-360, let's say complementary schemes are really, really helpful, because there's probably a difference between Exipact and Rx-360 is, let's say, an audit by certified auditors can be at least a basic information. And this doesn't mean, for example, for Exipact, a bit different than Rx-360, that a supplier wouldn't accept additional audits. So only the question is if you at least can cover at least the baseline requirements, and then probably focus on topics of high interest for you. It might be that you're highly satisfied with an Exipact audit or with an Rx-360 audit, but you have a product, let's say, of high risk for you. Let's say it's probably a potential blockbuster, and the material you intend to purchase is of extreme importance. So it might not be necessary that you go to all the details. Okay, how's quality organized? What about your plant? Blah, 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 blah. But you want to have a serious discussion. How is one specific step in filling done? What about, for example, microbiology, quality control, and so on? So you have focused, additional, complementary, let's say, meetings, audits, technical meetings, however they call them. And therefore, I think this is really the future to go. Rx-360, Exipact, potentially plus additional, more focused audits.
Hi, Scott Hanley with Janssen. I have sort of a two-part question. One was one criticism or concern I've heard from some people in the supplier quality world regarding like the Rx-360 audits or other things is when they go out, they may take one auditor and spend a day and a half and come up with 4 to 6 observations. When a team like that goes in, you know, it's 3 people, 4 days. Now they've got a list of 25 recommendations. You know, is it sort of changing the level of detail that we're looking at? And then also around that, when like the auditing team comes in and comes up with a list of observations or citations or whatever, how are the CAPAs for that managed? Is it the team follow up on those and review the mitigation activities around them and then publish those as well and track them, or how is that aspect managed?
So the two parts of the question is, so I go get one auditor today, I get 3 observations. If I get a more in-depth audit with 3 auditors for 5 days, I'm going to get 15 observations. I don't want 15. You're going to get 15 observations anyway. It might be you're going to get more. If you get 25 one-day audits times 3, that's 75. Right? If we come in once for 5 days and you get 15, that's less. I mean, so I mean, you have to look at it in its totality, right? It's different, it's mind-changing. And there is a CAPA management process through the Rx-360 audit program. I have been out of touch with those working teams, so I can't give you those details, but there is a CAPA management process that they go through. And the other nice thing about it, from my perspective, is if 25 of my closest friends go audit my friend here, and we get 5 observations, and I say the corrective action is X, and this is what it should be in my mind, and it has a high bar, pain in the ass kind of approach, or maybe it's just 2 of us, me and Genentech, right? Say that. And the rest of you guys say, no, this is the approach to take down here. It's a recalibration tool for me, right? To say, well, wait, I just got automatic benchmarking data. On the other hand, if we all say do it here, and they were thinking do it here, and 25 of their best customers were all in it, it's another piece of benchmarking. So it allows us to get data and benchmarking to calibrate our quality systems in real time using real examples, which how much value is that? That's like worth, priceless.
And sort of tagging along that then, is there a feedback mechanism so that, as a customer of that audit process, I can review the recommendations and things and sort of feedback in, like you said, the benchmarking of maybe I'm too high or maybe I think you're too high or something. There's a feedback mechanism for that in as well.
Yeah, so you'll see the idea is once we get all the data in the database, there is that data repository will provide all that data to the members, right? So you get to see that. So that's the value of it. But what it will stop, and we can't have this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, this endless back and forth with a supplier on a CAPA, right? Because when you have 25 companies, it's unmanageable, right? but there's a little bit, but we have to cut it off at some point.
Don Zagoda with Procter & Gamble, and I'll answer from a manufacturer's point of view on some of that is, we produce a range of products across regulatory status and probably require about 1,000 audits per year right now. And we're going to push, we just joined Rx-360 this fall and really look forward to participating in the joint audit program. And we're going to push as many of our audits that are applicable under Rx-330, 360 scheme, into the shared audit program. But, we see that there's a lot of splintering across the world from, regulatory standards, auditing schemes, and even the auditing firms. And so it's a fairly significant effort to really find for which materials you're producing, which are the valid or relevant schemes, and where do you go, what can go into Rx-360, what goes to, Exapact or, GFSI and, a dozen other schemes. And some are better and more robust than others. There's some certifications that, frankly, you can just buy if you find a friendly auditor because they don't have the right governance model in place. And so, as a manufacturer, you got to screen those out. My question was around purchase of small chemicals that typically go from a manufacturer to a distributor. As you look at supply chain security and quality management, do you see a industry movement away from that distributor model to have more direct interaction with these small manufacturers, or do you see potentially moving more towards a distributor model where you leverage the distributor to really apply a lot of the supply chain security and quality controls with those manufacturing sites?
Let's get a regulatory view first.
Sorry?
Let's get a regulatory view about that first.
Well, I'm not sure that it is, if you mind me just I'm not in a good position to actually comment on the practice of manufacturers and whether there's a movement. Clearly both models are acceptable but need to be managed, but I'm not in a position really to comment on that. Thanks.
I'd like to maybe comment on that. From a Roche Genentech perspective, we very much see we'll continue to use distributors. But we do want to talk with those distributors about better defining their role and their responsibility in the process. Because as I was mentioning to Rob at BWR last night over dinner, sometimes when we use a distributor who buys on behalf of Roche, we lose sight of the manufacturer. And from a risk management perspective, we're concerned with the manufacturer, not just the distributor. So in the same way, we plan to continue to use distributors and potentially expand their use, but I think we just need to be more definitive as to what their role is, what is expected of that distributor, and make sure that they are, in fact, taking the appropriate measures to mitigate any risk in the supply chain.
Yeah, I would concur with that. At Parago, certainly the diversity of materials that we have, distributors are an essential part of our supply chain, but you're absolutely right. We don't want to lose sight of the original manufacturer, and especially with the GDP regulations that we're all being adhering to, there's more and more importance on visibility and actually accountability from the original manufacturer. And some of the difficulty we have is, as for a number of our materials, we have no leverage. We're a very, very small buyer. Our distributor knows that, and so they can try to cloud our interaction with the original manufacturer. So that's an ongoing challenge. I think it's throughout the industry, but it's something that I don't know of any trends where we're moving away from a distribution network. I just don't know.
Saved by the bell, I guess. So I will say from a regulatory perspective, I know, in discussions with the FDA on the language infedasia, right? The FDA was pushing it. There were factions within the FDA that were pushing to restrict the use of brokers and distributors significantly. The supply chain is only strong as your weakest link, right? Amgen uses distributors. We have to, right? We have some things only come in railroad cars, and we use 100 mLs of it a year, right? It just doesn't work without a distributor there. But what we demand is transparency. And if we don't get transparency, and if that distributor's not adding value, right? If a distributor's adding value, we will not leave a distributor for transparency because we know who their manufacturer is. But if a distributor won't provide transparency, we'll find another distributor. We will. That we can do easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I just would like to underline what Martin was saying. I think that the point is really, let's say the added value. And the other question is, as mentioned, let's say if you buy only 1% of a production, probably your yearly demand of materials, probably less than 1 day's production, probably 1% of 1 day's production of some products, let's say you won't make a direct business. Nevertheless, I don't know if Gerald wants to come back to this point. Let's say there's also Europe recommendation to buy from the original manufacturer as a recommendation, but let's say in practice, as we discussed, let's say there are some limitations, and therefore, let's say a highly qualified distributor really ensuring the transparency of the supply chain, adding value to the product, has his place in the supply chain for sure.
Yeah, I will come back to that. I think the original question was there a trend towards this? And that was what I wasn't able to answer. In respect to actually holding distributors and brokers accountable, I think the new European legislation does move us in that direction. And it moves you to the point where you are obliged to work with brokers who are registered as well. So there's an accountability for that, which I think moves us in a direction which helps. Although clearly, the shorter the supply chain, the better it is, but it isn't always possible.
So let's take 2 more questions.
I wanted to go back to the audit topic briefly. So you mentioned that the biggest hurdle to expand this is that we all are unique or feel we are unique. So specifically, if I think about that uniqueness in my company, I believe that what I hear a lot from our quality people is that we need product-specific audits. We want to see about the specific, whatever, qualification protocols, validation protocols for our specific product. And so I was wondering, is there any thought about how can we mitigate that need in a way that we can overcome it? Because if we can do that, then probably we get traction.
So I'm going to give you first probably the politically correct answer, and then I'm going to give you a devil's advocate answer afterwards. So clearly, if you can get someone to do your basic audit of their quality systems in a company and get that out of the way, and then you guys individually can go in and talk on the technical aspects of a validation report for something that's critical, the supplier would love to do that. They love to have those technical exchanges to understand what your needs. So to me, I think it works. So let them do the basic part, and get rid of that off the table, their quality systems, how they're doing it. And let's just go in and talk about these 1 or 2 really key topics. Suppliers will love to do that. But now I got another question for you. So you have a supplier. You're not worried about the quality system. You trust it, that the quality system, you audit it, it's okay. But you don't trust them to do a validation report, so you have to go study it with a magnifying glass. Doesn't seem kind of really. If you don't trust them, you shouldn't go look at a piece of paper. You should go watch them make every batch you make. Right? It's like when we go and release batches, right? I have to look at the batch record, page by page, detail by detail. And I go, why? You trust our quality system, And I go, if you don't trust the guys in manufacturing to fill out the paper right, how do you trust them to do all those complex manufacturing steps, which is a lot harder than filling out a piece of paper? If you don't trust them how to do the paperwork, you better go and watch them make the product every day.
But this is really a paradigm shift in terms of culture, I guess. So that's
absolutely.
We got to get there to be able
I said
to
the first
it.
answer was the politically correct one.
So I have a question to Gerald. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation, providing insight for the Falsified Medicine Directive in Europe, which is really a game-changing, directive. But just now, one question concerning the validity of the written confirmation of the local authorities. I mean, you mentioned already by yourself that is need to develop confidence on those written confirmation. Nevertheless, in the pharmaceutical supply chain or business, there's always a shared responsibility. So if something is going wrong, of course, the COOPY guy have to look on the qualification of their supplier, looking on the written confirmation. But if something going wrong, what is the liability of those authority writing those written confirmation that those products are really manufactured based on the EU GMP guide? Is any agreement between EU authorities and those local authorities who making this written confirmation?
Yeah, I think you ask a very good question. Thank you for the question. The bottom line is that we have no jurisdiction over other sovereign nations internationally. So legal liability is difficult, a difficult area. I think it's probably worth stepping back a little, though, and recognising that the requirement for written confirmations is not instead of anything that was already in place. It's in addition to what's already in place. So you are in a better position after the 2nd of July last year than you were before the 2nd of July. It doesn't take anything away, which is why that bottom line I added to the slide on the QP's responsibility was there. How reliable are they? I mean, recent incidents which are in the public domain with respect to a particular Indian company might cause you to question. There was a written confirmation from, or there have been written confirmations from the Indian authorities. There is liaison with the authorities. There is discussion. In fact, I'll personally be in India in the week after next, and that discussion goes on. I think it's moving in the right direction, but I would emphasise the fact it doesn't take away from any of the safeguards that were already in place. It adds to them. And insofar as it becomes more and more reliable with time, it will add more and more to the level of assurance.
Hello, everyone. Saurav Singh, Supplier Quality, Baxter. I have a question. Since most manufacturers have a supplier performance scorecard, any thoughts on a Rx-360 and scorecard for suppliers?
So part of Rx-360's legal structure and the way we set it up was not to violate any anti-competitive or antitrust laws. So we can audit a supplier, we can provide information about suppliers, but we can't grade a supplier, right? The U.S. Department of Justice and the Europeans were concerned that if the 25 or 50 largest pharmaceutical companies all graded a supplier, it's creating a blacklist, right? And that would could present the opportunity to financially disincentivize the suppliers to lower the prices, to do all kinds of bad things, right? So we're not allowed to grade a supplier in a performance scorecard or in an audit itself. We provide the data, and then every firm has to take that data and use that data how they see fit for their products, their culture, their procedures, et cetera. Now, the supplier-led working group is talking about putting on the Rx-360 website a supplier portal where the suppliers can put all of the data, right, or links to their data, past audits, past inspections, sustainability, checklists, questionnaires, and that could be the foundation of the scorecard. And then you as the manufacturer could take that information and establish your own grading system rather than us doing it. But all the data should be, we're going to try to put that in a central repository for suppliers.